So again, welcome everybody to our Wednesday live training series. Today, I get the privilege and honor to discuss the adaptability quotient with you. My name is Cara Bedford. I'm the Director of Strategic Marketing with compuvision, and we will be going through a few different slides today, mostly about thinking differently and looking at the way we can kind of shift our mindset in terms of what's been happening around the world and what we're experiencing as businesses, especially in Alberta. So I want to start with this disclaimer. So I'm not an industry expert or specialist when it comes to adaptability. I'm definitely an outsider with a fresh perspective. We say beware the expert, because history has shown that the best inventions or solutions rarely come from experts, and they almost always come from outsiders. And that is a quote that is been by Salim Ismail from Exponential Organizations, and it's one that we as compuvision definitely have taken into stride over the last couple of years with what we're doing in terms of future-proofing, accelerating businesses, and looking at technology for not just today, but also for tomorrow. So when we talk about this mindset shift that is going on, it really comes down to two opposing positions. Am I going to look at technology from a questioning aspect, or am I going to defend? And really we look at that as, am I going to look at it with ego, or I'm going to look at it with essence? And I want to challenge you in today's presentation to kind of curb that ego, curb that defensiveness, and really think about questioning the way that things have always been or the status quo, and come at it with, again, that essence, and maybe thinking about things in ways that you could do differently that you never really thought before. So just really being open and looking at, if we are going to grow and use our minds to shift perspectives, that we really want to come at it with curiosity, as curiosity kind of opens ourselves up for transformation and change. So normally when we're presenting this, especially in a large room, we go, has anybody heard of AQ? And you get the odd hand here and there. And so really what we're looking about is IQ. Everyone has kind of heard of that. We've all been through testing, and we've been measured with our IQ through the time that we go to school to even today. Then, HR kind of got a little bit excited and said, okay, well, maybe we can fill our companies with people not just that are smart with IQ, but also looking at EQ, which is our emotional quotient. But then came kind of this technology wave, and really what we're seeing out of places like Singularity University is, what is our AQ? And AQ is how we can change, grow, and thrive in the world. And AQ is really our adaptability quotient. And so the next generation and today's worker is really going to be challenged to go through a lot of different changes and disruptions and innovations like they never have before. And even in the past, 5 to 10 years, we've seen so much technology growth and change that we are starting to look at the human race as adaptability specialists, and how we're going to kind of flex that muscle that we're not used to flexing, normally. And change is hard. Change is not something that we normally like to have happen in our world. And so it's the how we can change, grow, and thrive in tomorrow's world. So we got to bring this back to innovation versus disruption. And innovation and disruption are quite big buzzwords that we're hearing a lot. I feel like every second piece of calendar invite that I get is inviting me to some sort of disruption event. And so I really want to start with kind of a history and maybe English lesson on what the two words actually mean and how they differ. And so innovation is making something better. And if you look at the screen, we've got the tape Walkman that kind of came out, and this is the way that we would, put the tape in, we'd take our pencil, we'd rewind, and we would really listen to music in this fashion. On our hip, we would need to have a case that would hold all the tapes, and that was just the way that we listened to music. And then later, we looked at this innovation of product, and the innovation of product changed from tape to CD. And so while we didn't change the way we accessed music or listened to it, we really just changed the device, and we changed the way that the music was stored. And so this is really, when we look at the tape player to the CD Walkman, it was an innovative product that made something better. But then come 2001, and we've got this guy that comes on the scene. So this is the Apple iPod, and this really disrupted the way that we access, that we listen, that we download. Like the idea of downloading music was never something that we did before. And so we look at this as making something obsolete. So it disrupted the way that we listen and access music, and it really changed the music industry forever. And today, those iPods are really in our phones, and we're looking at, the different ways that we use these smart devices as many things, more than just a phone. It's now a music device, an iPod, a video. And so when we look at the timeline between innovation and disruption, we really want to make the differentiating value that innovation is, again, making something better, while disruption is making something obsolete. And in 2005, this person who, oh my gosh, who knew, would graduate high school. And at that point, the iPod actually cost $499. I had to look because I actually got an iPod as one of my graduation gifts. And it was really funny because it was pink, and it didn't have any of the touchscreen functionality or voicification with Siri as the iPods or our phones have today. Today, I looked on Amazon this morning. You can buy an iPod new for $50. And so we look at the way that the curve of technology adoption into, disruption, and we're going to go into this curve of where things actually move in our economy and our society, and why that growth mindset is so important. Because again, we really demonetized and dematerialized the music industry as we knew it back then to today. So I want to start with this story. This is another graduation hopeful. Her name is Hope, and this is her story. So the autonomous vehicle pulls up in front of the grand entrance of the iRobot Sales Center. An 18-year-old Hope Lopez bounds out of the car. She runs towards the entrance. She leaves her parents behind like any good 18-year-old does, and she reaches the glass double doors, where a biped robot ushers her inside with a formal flourish. This gigantic showroom floor is filled with robots of all shapes, sizes, and functions. There were care robots designed to look vaguely human, and also big, beefy construction bots that were all machine, a whole collection of tiny, delicate flying robots that performed very mundane tasks ranging from cleaning to surveillance, and also some other robots that did things like performed microsurgery. It was not Hope's first visit. Like all her friends, she had come before to marvel at the collection and dream about which robot would one day be hers. Now that day had come, and after 12 years spent learning how to collaborate with humans and machines, developing her creative skills, Hope was a multimedia storyteller, didn't you know? She was contributing to community projects, and she was here to collect, finally, her graduation dividend. The year is 2040. And like everyone who graduates in this year, Hope was given a credit to purchase her first commercial robot. And unlike her grandparents, Hope would never have a job. Instead, she would own the means to create her own income, and with that first robot, those earnings might be small, but over time she would grow her fleet of workers and build a comfortable lifestyle. More importantly, while her robots toiled, she would have the time to pursue many other passions that she had, like contributing her unique talents to the community. So before you dismiss this little scenario as optimistic science fiction, just remember that only a few years ago, it seemed impossible that you would have a smart agent in your home that you could talk to. That was considered far out fantasy, and that it was impossible to predict what our autonomous future might look like. But we can expect that robots and artificial intelligence are here to stay, and they are going to do more and more of the traditional work that is normally reserved for us humans. So many people fear this. They fear that future, and they see it in terms of more versus less. So more robots equal less jobs, less income, less opportunities for humans. And that view actually misses the significance of this coming disruption, and it shows society's lack of adaptability. So this story was built by an animator named Joe Tankersley, and he is a futurist who has been working, again, with Disney for most of his career to look at what the future possibly could be for our societies and our cultures. And he really looks at this choice, and he says that we have a choice, that we can choose fear or we can choose excitement with kind of this new coming. And it's our personal choice how adaptive we are and are going to be in the society. And so we can either embrace or resist. But know this, your historical success will actually be your greatest downfall. And we've heard the stories, we've heard the Blockbuster and the Netflix stories time and time again. And we really want to look at the way that we have always done things is not the way that we need to look at doing things moving forward. I mean, we can also take a look at what's going to be valuable and what the tomorrow workplace is going to be. And there's these tools that we have online, such as this, and this is willrobotstakemyjob.com. And it's kind of fun if you want to, put in your spouse's information or, maybe some colleagues of yours and see what percentage they will get in terms of tomorrow's workplace automation. And so I took the liberty of putting a few on here. And starting with my own, the marketing director and executives, we're about 2% for probability of automation. But, colleagues of mine, graphic designer, we start to look at 93%. I know that there are a few of you that are in construction that are on this call. And so we look at the construction laborer being 88% automated. Anybody that's in insurance or finance, we're seeing a lot of automation coming in that sector and has already been starting, as we've seen with our clients. The underwriter position, which used to be teams and departments and buildings of people, is looking at a 99% automation rate in the coming years. So what does this all mean? How do we kind of navigate and flex that adaptability muscle and make sense of it so that we can grow it and really look at that excitement piece rather than fear piece? And so I'm going to give you a tool today that I think really puts this framework into motion. So those are the 6 Ds, or the exponential framework that we see out of Singularity University. And they really look at the digitization curve moving in this rate that it has these stages. And we look at, you need an idea, you need something to digitize. And then when you bring that digitization to market, it is deceptive. Everyone's like, oh, you can't do this, or we can't, this isn't going to work. You kind of have some trial and error, some A/B testing. And then something happens and it moves into this disruptive phase. And you can see that between 3, 4, 5, and 6, the timing is much shorter than between 1 and 2. And it goes on this exponential framework curve where all of a sudden we have the iPod. and we have, those very large technological advances that we know and love in society today. And so here are a few examples of this curve. So let's start with digitization. So, we all know the Ubers of the world, and Uber came out on the scene, very bold, but they didn't change the actual taxi. What they changed is actually the way that you access it. So by building this app and making a frictionless way that you can order a taxi no matter where you are by using, again, back to that smartphone piece. And so when we look at digitization, it doesn't have to be a physical product or being. It can be frictionless economy. It can be different things like apps or technology, but it all starts with this digitization that happens. Next, we will then go into deceptive. And here I have an example of the newspaper. The first online newspaper was the Columbus Dispatch, and it went online on July 1st, 1980. That very first newspaper that went online took over 30 hours to download. And so, of course, when you're thinking about, I can pick up my paper and I can just read it, or I have to wait 30 hours to download this paper, it's pretty deceptive. But what they didn't see is when technology finally caught up with the idea, it would explode. And now today, a lot of our media, there was a stat in the Canadian Journal just a couple weeks ago saying that, 98% of our media is now consumed via social media and social media links. And so when we look at the idea of this online move for newspapers and news, it really moves from deceptive into disruptive, but you can kind of challenge that from 1980 to today, that's a pretty long time. Then we go into disruptive. So this is a 3D printing machine that actually is 3D printing turbojet engines in people's garages. You can open source this entire model here. And this guy on the left 3D printed this in 4 days and built himself a turbojet engine in his garage that was fully functional and that he could use. The cost to 3D print this jet engine was just under $4,000. And so we think about the cost of we've normally building these types of engines, and I couldn't find a definitive cost online, but it is definitely a lot more than when we think about 3D printing. And so we're seeing a lot of 3D printing disrupting a lot of the models and the ways that we work. One of them being construction, 3D printing houses, 3D printing concrete structures, 3D printing cities. These are all things that if you just take a quick Google, you can find a lot of information and videos on, but that shows you that disruptive curve starts to happen really quick. Dematerialize, we talked about this previously, but the idea that all of that on the left-hand side of your screen, the video camcorder, the really cool, awesome stereo box, the CDs, the records, the Walkmans, the DVDs, the players, all of that it took to make media back in the day is now literally in the palm of your hand in one device. So it really dematerialized the music industry, the media industry, and the way that we consume music media and really connect with each other as a community. In demonetize, we look at the things that have kind of come and gone. And this is a really important step. One of the things that, again, we look at is Uber, meaning no more taxi fleets. And Amazon, really looking at that no more bookstores, taking the bookstore and making it online, accessible 24/7. Skype was the very first thing to take this idea of the no long distance call fees. Google no more research libraries, Craigslist, your classified ads, and Airbnb is really, really challenging the hotel chains and the way that we've, normally done things. And so demonetize is taking something and really expanding that piece. And again, when we think about disruption, we think about making something obsolete. And so those are the pieces that are obsolete when we look at what has happened in these demonetized digital ages. And democratize. So in 2017, the African mobile phone growth hit 1 billion. And that is a really big number for a country that still has mud huts, that does not have running water and plumbing. Most of the cities and villages do not have sewer systems. They have the entire world in the palm of their hands. And with 5G, we're seeing the entire world become connected faster and more efficiently than ever before. And so when you think about the adversity that they have had to, go through, and now all of a sudden they're looking at this world that they've never seen before, what do you think their adaptability quotient is? And this idea of this one connected world really sets the mindset of adaptability and change, because it only works when we live in an abundant world. And so anything is possible when we live abundantly and we turn scarcity into abundance. And when anything is possible, it's easier to adapt. So if you want to learn more about the 6 Ds and those curves, the curve that we went on, and that idea of scarcity to abundance, looking at the impact of the world and how we're creating wealth, this is a really great book. It's called Bold by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler. And Peter Diamandis is the founding father of Singularity University. And so a great book. It is also on audiobook if you're not into reading. It is voicified. And so it is something that I would challenge all of you to pick up and maybe learn a little bit more about if you're interested. So I will leave you with this thought. We are moving faster than we ever have before, but slower than we ever will again. And so this quote is inspired by writers and experts, and they're really trying to explain what the tech-centric future is going to be. And when we think of adaptability in that tech-centric future, and we think of scarcity and abundance, and again, the 6 Ds and where we're moving, it really comes back to that original slide on disruption. We are living in that world where you will either be a disruptor or you will be disrupted. And there is very little in between. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time today. If you have any questions about anything we talked about here, you can connect with me up on Twitter at YEGCloud or via my email, cbedford@compuvision.biz. I want to just alert you to 2 of our coming up series. So next week on Wednesday, again at 2 p.m., we have Technology for Marketing Teams. This is actually going to be a panel. We're bringing in 3 marketing experts from different places from around the world to talk about some of the different technology adoptions and cultures that they're seeing right now in our ever-changing, quick-paced, technology-centric world. And then next after that, we have a specific industry needs presentation that's going to talk about legal and the legal team needs that we are seeing, especially from our clients as we do service a large number of legal teams in that industry. And that will be presented by our VP of Sales and Marketing, Nathan Lee. So without further ado, I want to thank you again, and I will stick around if there are any questions that you have, please feel free to shout them out or raise your hand or throw them in the chat. And I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Cara.
Great. I'm just going to stop the recording.